Alright, so boom, my favorite wrestler of all time, for real, on God, 100 emoji, is Eddie Guerrero. And today we got a video that is Eddie Guerrero hated working with these wrestlers. I'm reacting to the content live with my flock over on Twitch. But if you'd like to support the original creator of the content, which you should do, click that top link in the description. Want to hang out with us? Click the bottom link. With that being said, let's get right into the video.
Eddie Guerrero wasn't supposed to make it. They said he was too small and he had too many personal issues to get to the top. But he did make it because he was better than all of the people who wrote him off. And once he got to the top, he didn't bite his tongue if he had a problem with someone in the locker room. Eddie and Vampiro never got along with each other. It wasn't one incident or a specific falling out. Eddie just didn't like the guy, and that feeling never really changed. The tension started back in Mexico. Both men were rising stars, but they came up.
Wait. November, is this the same Vampiro from Lucha Underground? I'm assuming it is. You got a similar face, yeah. What the fuck? It's all connected, bro. And yeah, the art bar frog splash is the fucking... That's the 6-star frog splash. But that should change my world, bro.
Up very differently. Eddie was earning respect the hard way by delivering great matches and proving himself as one of the best technical wrestlers of the era. Vampiro, on the other hand, exploded in popularity thanks to his looks and charisma. In Mexico, he was getting over like a rock star, despite not being a standout in-ring performer. From the beginning, Eddie thought Vampiro was arrogant and self-important and more concerned with his image than actual wrestling. And when they both ended up in WCW later in the decade, nothing had changed. In fact, Eddie's opinion of Vampiro only got worse. I gotta admit, I wasn't thrilled to see Vampiro on the WCW roster when I came back.
Damn,
I knew him
Eddie
from back in Mexico, and he was one of the most two-faced guys I've ever had the displeasure of working with. He'd shake your hand and say, "I'm so thankful, it's an honour to work with you," then badmouth you behind your back. You could never believe half the shit he said. Maybe some of it was true, maybe it wasn't. To this day, I still don't know when the guy was being honest. In 1999, Vampiro started getting TV time as part of a faction called the Deadpool alongside Raven and the Insane Clown Posse. The gimmick leaned into gothic theatrics and it was all trench coats and face paint and moody promos. Eddie had no issue with the Insane Clown Posse personally. In his book, he actually praised them for being respectful to the locker room, but he didn't think the wrestlers in the angle were putting enough effort in. Meanwhile, he and the likes of Rey Mysterio and Conan were out there every night, putting everything on the line and not getting the credit they deserved. Eddie didn't respect what Vampiro brought to the table in Mexico, and now in WCW, he was being featured alongside celebrities like he was a big deal. In a lot of ways, Insane Clown Posse were more professional than Vampiro. They were huge wrestling fans, and as a result, they were very respectful and appreciative that any wrestler would take them seriously. "Anything you want to do, Eddie," they'd say, then honestly work to the best of their abilities to get the match over. They were definitely easier to work with than Vamp. He'd be all agreeable before the match, but as soon as you got in the ring with him, he'd start trying to put himself over at the expense of everyone else and the match.
I know there's gotta be more wrestlers that are like that, right? That kinda... They had you believe in that shit is gonna go one way when you're in the ring, and then, but when you actually get out there, they're like trying to change shit on the fly on you. Like, were things not overseen by like agents for matches as much as they are? Well, probably not as much as they are now, but like, were they not so tightly like kept together by agents and producers back then? Because fellas going into business for themselves has got to be like the most like, what the fuck do we do now sort of deal when it comes to these like live shows. And then if they got someone in a position like that where like they're trusting them enough to put them in like celebrity spots and all that, it's like, do I even have enough power to say something about this dickhead? Bro is a cock. Oh no, man. But to also be fair to Vampiro, we're just here on one side of the story here. So we don't know what what the actual deal was, just in case. Just in case. I'll be fair. I'll be Vampire Guy's advocate.
But by the end of the 90s, Eddie was frustrated working for WCW in general, and especially having to work with Eric Bischoff. At the time, Bischoff was WCW's executive producer, the guy calling the shots behind the scenes. Eddie was part of the Cruiserweight division and one of the best wrestlers on the roster, but he felt like Bischoff was treating him as an afterthought. Despite how good the Cruiserweight division was, WCW never gave it much respect, and Eddie and the other smaller wrestlers were getting frustrated. Eddie was the Cruiserweight champion at least. That was until he was booked to drop the title to Ultimo Dragon in a match that lasted barely 90 seconds.
Oh no. Why we do that? Why we squash my mans like that? Don't squash my mans. You're not allowed to squash my mans, bro.
He was furious about this booking decision, and the next week he went straight to Bischoff and asked to be released from his contract. The conversation did not go well. Man, he was pissed. Eric reached across his desk for his cup of coffee, but he was so angry and agitated that he hit it off the edge. It flew right at me, spilling all over my pants. You'd think that would have snapped him out of his rage, but he just kept getting more and more aggressive. For a minute there, I thought it was going to come to blows. I was fully ready to knock him out.
After hearing about some of the backstage incidents, I do believe Eddie would have definitely threw hands with bro. I don't know if he would have knocked him out. But I do firmly believe Eddie would have definitely threw some punches his way. We reacted to a video about the wrestlers getting into backstage brawls, and not gonna lie, the Guerreros did not win. They did not win their backstage fights. Maybe, hear me out, maybe Eddie would have, popped the Bischoff in his chest a couple of times or something. I don't know. The record is low. Him and Chavo, they didn't win. Yeah, I put him in a fucking rear naked choke. It's done. That karate shit can't save you. I'm assuming. Yeah, November. He definitely tried to do some fuck shit. What? Hero got cracked a couple times? Yeah, hold that, Vampire Guy. Big L's. Allegedly.
Fortunately, Bischoff knew better than to fight me. He just stormed out of there, cussing me as he slammed the door behind him. A little later on, Bischoff and I sat down and had a less heated conversation. We both apologised and everything was cool, but for all intents and purposes, that was the last real conversation we ever had. That attitude towards the smaller wrestlers in WCW wasn't just coming from management, it was coming from the top guys in the locker room too, including Kevin Nash. Nash was firmly planted in WCW's main event scene, and at various points he even had influence over the booking. Both on screen and off it, Nash was one of the most powerful people in the company. And Big Sexy didn't exactly hide how he felt about the Cruiserweights. He was the one to coin the phrase vanilla midgets to describe guys like Eddie, Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko. It was his way of saying that they were technically solid wrestlers, but he found them boring and far too small to be believable. That label stuck, and Eddie never forgot it. He felt that Nash actively held people back, and that his influence in WCW was a big part of why the smaller guys were never given a real chance.
I definitely agree. Like, and Nash came from that culture, I guess, where like, the big dudes were just pushed to the moon in general in WWE, right? Like you just be a big motherfucker and it's like Vince had a hard on for you. So that I don't know if like you watching the smaller guys work, which is going over his head, because they have some of the most innovative and like fucking creative offense you'll ever see. The smaller dudes in general. I'm surprised that the talent WCW really had on that roster. Like, bro, I was missing out on all this? What? The Send you. Let me pick you up and drop you with this power bomb. That's the real heat. Yeah. Yeah, throw a big boot at you. Yeah.
Considering how little talent he had in the ring, Nash is one of the most arrogant people I've ever had the displeasure to know. He'd walk right past you and not acknowledge your presence unless he thought there was something he could get out of you. I don't say this lightly, but I genuinely feel Nash is evil. He's never done anything for this business. The only person he cares about is himself. What gets me is that Kevin Nash became a rich man from this business and then shit on the people that really cared about wrestling. From the day they arrived in WCW, he and his clique saw me and my friends as second tier. They used to call us the vanilla midgets, which was hugely insulting.
That's crazy, man. The disrespect. Vanilla midgets, by the way. Fucking insane. Man. I'm almost certain any arena would be more hyped to see a fucking Eddie Guerrero versus Rey Mysterio match than Kevin Nash versus your best. Get out of here. Get out of here, dude.
In 2003, Eddie got into a backstage fight with Charlie Haas after a tag match. It was Eddie and Chavo taking on Haas and Shelton Benjamin, and partway through the match, Eddie popped his elbow. He tried to let the guys know mid-match that he was hurt, but they stuck to the plan and continued targeting his arm. To Eddie, that crossed a line. Protecting your opponent in the ring was non-negotiable, especially if an injury had occurred. Shelton and Charlie kept picking me up, throwing me around and pulling on my injured arm. They were just making a rookie mistake, but I was hurting pretty bad and started getting hot. When we got to the back, Chavo said, "Come on, let's go talk to these guys." It turned into a screaming match right from the start. The four of us got into each other's faces, and before long, Charlie and I started pushing each other. Fortunately, the boys got in there and split us up before things could escalate any further. Incidents like that happen all the time backstage. The only thing to do is apologise and let time run its course. Eddie and Kurt Angle were two of the most intense personalities in the business, and in 2004 they clashed with each other backstage. By this point in his career, Eddie had been under a lot of pressure. He'd just come off his WWE title run, and while it had been a great achievement for him, it had also taken its toll. He was physically banged up and emotionally drained. He'd also found it difficult to live up to the expectations that came with being the guy carrying the brand on his back. And as always, Eddie was holding himself and everyone else to a very high standard. One night on SmackDown, that pressure boiled over. There had been a beatdown segment involving Kurt, Luther Reigns and Mark Jindrak. Eddie felt that Reigns and Jindrak had been far too stiff in the ring and didn't protect him properly. He was furious about it, but rather than go after the rookies, Eddie confronted Kurt.
Damn.
Eddie saw Kurt as the senior guy in their group and that he should have been keeping them in check. Backstage, they got into a shoving match with each other before Kurt grabbed him and put him in a front face lock and started choking him out. Reportedly, the Big Show had to physically step in and pull them apart. A few days later, they calmed down and talked it out. Kurt later posted this photo of the two of them taken right after the incident and shared the story himself. Kurt summed it up best when he said that he and Eddie were like brothers. They loved each other and hated each other with equal ferocity. By 2005, Eddie was one of the most trusted veterans in WWE. Batista, meanwhile, had just broken through to the top of the card. He was the new face of SmackDown, and Eddie was one of the guys expected to help make him a success. But at first, Eddie didn't make it easy. According to Batista himself, he was cold and distant towards him backstage. There was no specific blow-up, but just a lot of tension between them that took a while to get addressed. Batista said that he didn't understand it at the time, but Eddie had always held high standards for the people he worked with, and if he didn't think someone was ready for their spot, then he'd keep them at arm's length. Eventually, Eddie pulled him to one side and apologised for how he'd been acting.
I can imagine that kind of behavior from top guys. It's so crazy how, like, you'll hear some of the stories like this from people who are, like, really passionate about the business for real. Like, they take that standing and, like, the stature of the champion and, like, being a top guy really, really seriously. I'm always fascinated hearing shit like that, man. It's always like, fucking, I'm over here open mouth with you and I forgot I was streaming for a second. I'm like, oh.
And from that point on, he started opening up. He gave Batista advice, helped him with his promos, and started treating him like someone who was worthy of his position. In the months that followed, they teamed up on TV and worked together behind the scenes. Batista would later say that he came to see Eddie as a mentor and one of his greatest influences. Eddie passed away just a few months later, but in that short time, he made a real impact on Batista's career development. I think a lot of times Eddie's skill was overlooked. Eddie wasn't a large man in stature, but Eddie could work anybody. He could make you believe he was hurting anybody because he was so tenacious and vicious, but he was so talented, his timing was so good, and he could read the crowd better than most people I've worked with in my life. He supported me and really took the time to get to know me. He didn't listen to what everybody said. He lived in Tampa and I was in Tampa, so we travelled home together. The guy would talk to me about life and not just keep it all professional. Eddie took the time to get to know the man. He didn't care if I was the rookie or the big muscle head who was holding the title that was stealing his spot. He never thought like that. It's really hard for me to put into words how much Eddie meant to me.
Damn.
For all the people he clashed with, it's stories like this that show what an incredible individual Eddie Guerrero really was.
That's my fucking goat. I love Eddie Guerrero. That's my fucking goat. I'll say it again. This is a pretty tight video. I didn't know he had like a series where like superstars hated these wrestlers. This is kind of tight. I don't want to kind of vulture swoop in, but if you guys are curious about it, I guess we can do some more of these another time. Either way, check out the original uploader of this concept. My quickly top link in the description. And if you want to hang out with me and the flock live on Twitch and do the cool call thing that we do, because, we're cool birds and shit like that, click the bottom link in the description. I'll be seeing you in the next video unless you're weird. Don't be weird. Thank you so much to those of you that have made it over to the Patreon. I appreciate you.
I'm still hungry.